there guys, this is Malorianm and this is going to be a Warmachine 101. This is where I take questions from you guys that I gather from the Mr. Malorianm Facebook page, and I just spend some time talking about them, about your topics, your questions, and that's about it. So for this one here, I have 4 different questions I'll be covering, and let's just get into it. So the first question here comes from Chris Johnstone, and he says, how to convince yourself you can build a better list than the normal standard builds, and how to go about that? Well, the first thing is to realize what these normal standard builds are. This is something where it's also called the net list. Somebody has gone through, they've said, okay, given this caster, given these spells, given the lists I normally see, this is the best build that I can come up with to deal with these situations. And sometimes they're just, good old strong things regardless, like say like Haley 2 double Stormwall, and then other times it goes a little bit more into depth, and there's some really specific tools in there to deal with very specific situations. And I think that's really, when you're trying to break free that, when you're looking at this and saying, hey, this, tournament winning list is right here, how do I really break out of the box to go to something else, right? I mean, I can see right here from this last major event, this is what won. It looks really strong. Should I just grab it or should I go something else? I think the best way to convince yourself to go something else is really the fact that that list is designed for a specific situation. It's saying, hey, this is my style of play. These are the threats I'm thinking I'm going to see here. And so this is what I'm going to build to deal with that. And you have to realize that you're not that person and you're not in the same situation as that person. Maybe that list is really based off of assassination and you're more of a scenario player. Or maybe it's a scenario one, but you're more of an attrition guy, right? So the list that's out there that could be something that's designed to win might just not work for you because it's not really your style. Now, another good argument too to break out of that box is that when you see this list, like we were saying, it was designed to win at this tournament, typically these are people who have gone to the next level and said, you know what, these are the people I expect to be there, these are the lists I expect I have to beat, I'm going to design my list to beat those. And the thing is, unless you're going back in time and going to the same event, you're not going to be in that same situation. You're going to be at your own local event, or maybe you're traveling to a different event that's going to have different people, and even though it might be like there's been no new releases, it's still the same availability of options as everywhere else, it's going to be very different. Maybe in this area here, Khador is a big thing and you have to deal with Khador. Maybe if you go over to here, everyone's doing double Colossals and you have to deal with that. Maybe over here, it's this different tier list that everyone's really pushing. So if you're looking to these larger events and people saying, oh wow, I have to deal with this and this and this and this, just keep in mind that they are thinking about specific people that they are assuming are going to be there and specific lists, and that's all great, that's all fantastic, but you have to realize that your buddy Fred's going to be there, and Fred, he runs that crazy Crix list, and you're going to have to actually deal with that. So really keep that in mind. So I think that's the best way to look at it, and hopefully that answers your question. Alright, next one here comes from Mark Swaby and says, terrain placement, symmetrical or no? Now, of course, this won't always be your option because you'll go into an event and it'll just be set up for you, so it's not like you always have an option to move around the terrain where you want, but when you're playing at home, when you're playing at the shop on just a casual day, you can just throw the terrain wherever you want. So is it better to have symmetrical terrain or not? And really the answer is no, it's not. You should not be symmetrical. And the whole reason behind that is the fact that that's the reason between wanting to go first or second. Sure, there's some other options in there, like I want to be first so I can rush up the board, or maybe I want to go second so I can be the first one to score, or I can be counteracting my counter placing and counter deploying depending on what you did. But another big advantage is supposed to be going to the second player is picking that table side and ensuring that you are like, okay, I have to make sure you don't have that cover, or make sure that I have this. And it's a very, very key part. And if it is symmetrical, well then that whole advantage is lost. It's almost asking at the same time, like, should you actually just make it so both people deploy at 7 inches instead of 7 and 10, right? It's different advantages that you're supposed to be getting. Now, something to watch out for, though, is do make it symmetrical in terms, or maybe more fair, in terms of what there are the options. So you don't want to have like one side is like trenches and walls all over the place, and the other side is a bunch of like difficult terrain and water and stuff. Okay, that's not good. You want it so that there is a choice to be made, but you don't want to be dead obvious where one side's like a fortress and the other one's just garbage. So make sure that each side has its own advantages and disadvantages, so make them fair in that sense. Like maybe on this side there's a trench here, and on this side there's a wall, but it's kind of over at this side, and this one there's could be a tactical forest, and on the other side, well, there's a hill that's further back that maybe your shooters wouldn't be on, right? So make sure you balance that, but do not make it symmetrical. So pretty obvious answer there. You probably where this comes up, where people ask like, oh, this should probably be symmetrical, is the times where people have played a game and there has been one like super garbage side that somebody got stuck with, and then they decide from now on to make things fair, we'll just make it symmetrical. Well, no, the real answer is not to make one side stupidly bad and the other side stupidly good. So there you go non-symmetrical. Next one here is from Patrick Dimling, and he says, when list building, asking opponents to answer questions. I have a tendency of covering any eventual downsides in all lists, leaving less room to ask questions for the opposition. How do you go about balancing this, or do you mainly go balls to the wall in either direction? So this really asks the question of how you should be building your list, of whether it's something that asks questions or something that has the answers. And what that's really talking about is something that's asking a question is something like, hey, I have this storm wall. It is arcane shield. Can you deal with that? Or I have Kayazi. They have iron flesh on them. Can you deal with that? And so that's a part of your list that really asks a question. Parts of your list that then answer a question are things that counter those. So if you ever see something that's high defense, maybe you build something in there that has Electro Leap or something like that that automatically hits, or has AoEs. Dealing with high armor, maybe you're making sure to take in Ragman to boost your stuff, and you want Diana and Holt, and all these armor fixtures, and at the same time, and there's never with Diana and Holt, where they might be able to give out magical weapons, whereas if you were asking the question, you'd be putting in a lot of incorporeal stuff, saying, hey, if you don't have magical weapons, sucks to be you. So how far do you go to either of these one sides? Well, here's the risk. If you go and you just say, I'm going to ask this one main question, if people don't really have a good answer, you're going to crush them, and that's going to be awesome. But then you're going to get to that one guy that does have your answer, and it's going to be bad news. So in that case there, you want to either be building a list that asks multiple questions, or kind of poses one main question and then has more balancing factors. Now, of course, a big part of this question is about whether you're playing one list or two lists. Usually what I like to look at is, well, if you're playing one list, you're probably not playing Warmachine the best way you could. The best balancing thing about Warmachine is the whole idea where there are two lists, and it's not really the whole paper, rock, scissors. That's why there's a two-list system. So if you are in a club where everyone's just like, bring one list, have some fun, sure, if it's for fun, okay, but if you find that you are getting that paper, rock, scissors, start going the two lists. Now, when we are talking about two lists and what people are more regularly seeing for tournaments, the way that I like doing it is a lot of times I'll have one list that asks a major question. So whether it's like, hey, I have a bunch of dudes and I'm going to swarm you, or it's something like, I have this, double storm wall, what are you going to do about it? And I pose that. And then when I look at their list and the list pairing, I can look at both their lists and say like, okay, do they have an answer? And if it's no, bam, that list goes out. If they do have an answer, then all of a sudden I need to start balancing things either way. And that's where you need your second list to be able to go and counter for this. So again, if my question is, can you deal with a bunch of dudes? And so that must be something like shooting or mass effects that kills lots of infantry. Okay, what can I build in the other list? So if somebody had an answer to that, that answer wouldn't work over here. And you do have to be careful not to go all the way. So like, oh, this is just going to go the opposite direction, because then you can really get into a thing where it's almost like a coin flip. That's the real list chicken, where, you know, this list is really good against that one, but not that one, and the reverse is true for the other list, so who really knows what's going to happen? You know, so that's why the second list, I usually like to build it to counter that weakness for the other one, and then at the same time be a little bit more of your answering one, a little bit more all-rounded. So hopefully that answers your question. It really depends whether it's one list or two, and what's your level of risk you want to take. But for the most part, I always like having at least one list that asks a major question, and there won't be a lot more in that other than this major question it's asking, and then the other one will counter for that and have a lot more answers in it. Last one here comes from Bob Smith, and it says, is runes, EE, mad dogs, and other such lists messing up the meta? Now, I read this beforehand, and I kind of wish I was able to get more of an explanation about this, because, you know, messing up the meta is kind of a weird question here. And what it could be coming here is from the whole idea of like tier lists. You know, are tier lists really messing up the meta where you're really forced to deal with these certain things? And that kind of gets into the whole different topic about tier lists versus non-tier lists. But I think overall, the big thing to look at is that over the period of the game, there have always been releases and things that come out that have really shooken up the meta. So a good example is like when Morvana 2 came out. That was huge. That was crazy. How the hell are we going to deal with this? When Butcher 3 comes out, oh my god, this is crazy. What are we going to do about this? When Colossals came out, everybody had to adjust and change their game right away to deal with those things. Now, eventually, when everybody starts getting on board and everybody seems to have answers to those lists, they start to disappear. You don't really see Morvana 2 anymore. You know, she's really good, but people now have dealt with it enough that they know the weaknesses, they have prepared for it mentally and in their list, and they know what to do about it. Same thing with seeing like the double Colossals all the time, or Colossals in general. They're really starting to, you know, fade away a little bit. Butcher 3, same thing. He was major all the time. He's been slipping away, and you're going to see these same things here. You know, EE, runes, like runes have been around for a very long time. It definitely is a good list, but the thing is that eventually people are just going to have answers to that. And I believe too, I mean, this is some more that's more theorizing, but I kind of believe that PP also will make releases that kind of counter older stuff if they feel they need to rebalance. So I don't know if that's real or not, but either way, the players do have that power, and if everyone is just tired of seeing EE all the time, they're just going to build a counter to EE. And as a troll player, if all of a sudden you start saying like, damn, everybody has a counter to EE, they're going to start taking something else. So it's all going to ebb and throw. Like, you know, like I'm sure if we come back to this in 2 years, EE is not going to be everywhere like you see it right now. So there you go, guys. That's all the questions I had on here. Again, this is on the Mr. Malorianm Facebook page. If you haven't joined it and liked it, please do that. Not only do I ask these questions on here for Warmachine 101, but also for my Warmachine Wednesdays, there's also there where I post up the list and the scenario. You guys can bet on who you think is going to win and how, and there'll be prizes at the end of that. So check that all out, and either way, thanks for watching. Bye.